Hey everyone, this is Eddie here. I have with me a super special guest, Hendricks. A couple months ago, I asked him to share with me his personal mantra that he tries to live by every single day. And he's featured as one of 7 elders that I featured in my article, 7 elders that guide you towards your purpose. And so, welcome.
Thank you very much, Eddie. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. And so I'll read your mantra, which I just find to be so powerful and beautiful. And then I'll turn it to you to just introduce yourself and say whatever you'd like about this mantra. So your mantra is, I expand in love, creativity, and abundance every day as I inspire others who are interested to do the same.
Yes, well, I've evolved that mantra from the time when I wrote The Big Leap. The one that's in The Big Leap goes like this. I expand in abundance, success, and love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same. And I've changed the success part to creativity now because I find that creativity is the big hunger that people have. And if they will open up to their creativity, what I call your true creativity, it will bring success with it. But I don't invite people anymore to focus on the success itself, but the underlying energy for the success, which is you tapping into your basic true creativity. You see, so many people use their creativity in service of goals that are not their own goals. They may have a job that's paying them money and they use their creativity for it, but it's not what they really want to be doing. So what I want people to do in The Big Leap or in the new book, The Joy of Genius, what I'm asking people to do is to make a commitment every day to expanding your relationship with what I call your genius spiral, and to have that be your main focus rather than on money or anything that are the peripheral aspects of success. So I promise you that once you start opening up to that deep inner creativity, you start generating more success and generating better good feelings with people around you and money and that sort of thing. So what I ask people to do in The Joy of Genius and The Big Leap is really go down to the source of everything and open up the source so that they feel that kind of flow in every moment.
Wow. I love the way you talk about that, and also just the passion that you clearly have for doing this work. And so I really connect with that because my own journey and the people who I work with, their journey is their life so not being like that for so long, where people will, grow up and enter careers or live a life where they feel like they have to choose between fulfillment and security or success. And I definitely struggled with that as well. And so what's been your experience throughout your life? Like, I imagine you've perhaps gone through like a few major transformations in your life. And so how have you navigated that tension in your life?
Well, I've navigated it. It's been a long, slow journey. It had several great big leaps forward, which I can tell you about. But I come from a place of I had to deal with a lot of physical problems growing up. I was a very obese child, and then I became a very obese teenager. And I was taken around to different medical people because everybody else in my family was skinny, and there was something wrong with my glandular pituitary and thyroid and all that. But nobody in those days could ever figure out how to fix it. Until finally, I had a moment of enlightenment when I was age 24, and I realized that it was up to me. I had to do whatever I needed to do to heal that in myself. So I went from being a 320-pound 24-year-old to losing more than 100 pounds over the next year. And so what happened was there was a moment. I go back to the year 1969 when I was 24 years old, and probably way before you were born. And I had a moment where I went out for a walk one day, 320 pounds, puffing away on 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes a day, I wore big, thick glasses, and I was in this relationship that was very toxic. And she and I had this big fight. And so I went out for a walk to cool off afterwards, big argument. And I slipped and fell on the ice and kind of whoomp, went down on my back. And I didn't knock myself out, but I say I knocked myself. I had an out of Hendricks experience where I was kind of knocked free of my ego for a moment. And I realized, oh, I could have killed myself right there, because there was this big jagged rock just to the right of where I had fallen down. And I realized if I'd fallen down a foot to the right, my life could have been over. And so as I was laying there on the ice, I had this vision of seeing down through all the elements of myself that I'd never seen before, like my emotions of anger and sadness and fear and all these muscles that I felt were so tense. And I realized that I kept my muscles really tense so I wouldn't let out any of my feelings. But that the thing that really changed my life was I realized that down underneath all of my feelings and all of my tense muscles, there was this pure state of consciousness that was just like, it was like consciousness with nothing on it, just pure consciousness. And I realized that's who I really am. I'm not my tense muscles. I'm not my emotions. I'm not my 300-pound body. I'm this inner spirit. And so what I said to myself as I was kind of getting ready to get back up and walk back home, I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to feel that way in every moment, to feel that pure consciousness in every moment. And so I radically changed my diet over the next year. I only ate foods that I'd never eaten before. I figured, okay, since everything I've eaten before made me weigh 140 pounds too much, I'll start eating foods I've never eaten before. Things like blueberries and cantaloupes and apples and green beans and things that I would have never touched in a million years. And lo and behold, within a few months, I'd lost 75 pounds. And then over the next coming 6 months, I lost another 20 or 30 pounds. It was all in that process of bringing forth that inner state of consciousness, that state of pure consciousness that didn't have any history on it. And I had a great help along the way. Talk about miracles. An old friend of mine called me up one day and said that one of his college professors, he'd gone to Harvard, had just come back from India and was giving a talk up the road from where I lived, and did I want to go? And so I said, okay. So we went up there, and it turned out to be Ram Dass, who had just come back from India, and he had his robes on and everything. And there was a little group of about maybe 15 or 20 of us that gathered around and listened to him talk all afternoon. And afterwards, I went up to him and I said, you know, I just had this big enlightenment experience where I fell down on the ice, and I'd like to find some friendlier ways to do that. What would you suggest I do? And he looked at me and he said, well, you should do some breathing exercises and yoga, and you should also do some meditation. And I said, well, where would I learn about something like that? And he said rather dismissively, he said, oh, don't worry, something will come to you. And I said, okay, you know, that was an odd thing, but the next day I was at the grocery store and I was pushing my cart out, and I stopped there in line, and I looked over to my left, and there was a little kiosk of paperback books. And one of them was called Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation by Jess Stern. And I plucked it up off the kiosk and I started looking through it. And lo and behold, what it was a little book, but there must have been 100 different breathing exercises, meditations, yoga postures. It was basically a little encyclopedia of everything that Ram Dass had just told me to do. And so I bought it. I remember it then cost the outrageous price of 95 cents. This was 1969. And so I bought that paperback book and I took it home that afternoon, and I just started working my way through it. And by about midnight, I'd gotten to the meditation part. And so I started doing this meditation out of the book, which was just simply repeating Om, Om inside. And I did that for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I went into this state of pure consciousness that was that same state that I'd found when I knocked myself down on the ice and kind of knocked myself out of my ego experience. So that let me know that I didn't have to keep falling over to get enlightened. I could do it in a much more friendly way. And so that was really the beginning of what I now think of as my spiritual path of finding out who I really was. Because within a year, I didn't have to wear the glasses anymore. I was out of the relationship. I quit smoking. I lost 120 pounds and had lost even more. I weigh about right now. I weigh about 180 pounds. I'm about 6 feet tall, so I'm kind of athletic. I weigh exactly the same as Tiger Woods does, and I'm a golfer. So if you ever see Tiger on the golf course, you can say, "Ha, that's what Hendricks looks like." I'm not quite as good a golfer as he is, though.
That's awesome. I mean, your story is full of, well, I think the way you tell it makes it sound almost like things just kind of fell into place, which on one hand, it kind of did in a sense, because the fall, the teaching from Ram Dass, the book, all of that were these miracles, like you mentioned. But what I want to just acknowledge and shine a light on is the hard work that you still had to do.
Yeah.
That even though you losing all that weight, changing your entire lifestyle and all of that took just, I'm sure it took a lot of discipline and consistent just showing up. And also, those miracles might have very well just disappeared if you hadn't said yes to them.
Oh, that is so important. In fact, that's a key lesson that I've learned is in one of the Carlos Castaneda books, I forget the name of it, he talks about everybody has a cubic centimeter of chance that if it opens up for you and you need to take it. And I tell my students that come here to work with us oftentimes a story about how you create your own grace as you move through life with little tiny decisions. I was rushing madly through the Dallas-Fort Worth airport one time to catch a plane, which always is at the other end of the entire airport. And it's one of those airports where you have to board a train and go around and everything. So it's a very big deal. And so my plane had been late, and so I was rushing madly along, and I saw up on the board that it was already boarding, and I still was going to take me at least a half an hour to get there. So there was this one moment where I realized, okay, this is completely out of my control. I might as well just enjoy what I'm doing. And so I slowed down and I'm walking along, having a happy time, and got aboard my train and went around. And it still took me exactly the same amount of time. It took me about 30 minutes to work my way all around to the. So when I get up to the gate, I see that the gate has closed and that there's a guy standing at the podium with the clerk, enraged. And he's yelling at the poor clerk. He was saying, "My name is Humphrey T. Jordan III, and I'm going to sue you for every penny you're worth if you don't get me on that airplane." And the poor clerk was sitting there. The clerk had probably had a very bad day, and the clerk was sort of, kind of taking it, And so I came up behind this event happening, and I just stood there, and I kind of breathed and waited and everything like that. And so finally, this enraged guy stormed up the concourse and walked off, and I stepped up into the number one position, and I said to the clerk something like, "Boy, tough day, huh?" He said, "Yeah, you wouldn't believe it." And I said, "Well, it sounds futile to ask, but I'm booked on that plane too, and it looks like the gate is closed." And he looked around and he says, "Yes, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about it." Just then, the door opens and I see a flight attendant quick walking across and whispers in the guy's ear. And he says, "Oh, we've had a miscount. We have a seat in first class." And I saw him do the following thing. He looked up the concourse to see that guy walking up the concourse. And then I saw him go, and then he turned back to me and said, "Would you like that seat?" And so I went from no seats to sitting in first class, just kind of by accepting being in the moment and deciding to have a good time anyway, and not getting all wired up around what I think the universe had to look like. And so those kinds of moments, I think, are the moments where we manufacture our own grace as we move through the world.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And I would imagine, like, if you had been rushing and, kind of working yourself up, like, you very well might have been that guy that was yelling and and would have missed out on a first class seat.
Yeah, it was an amazing, amazing experience. And I thought about it many times because there was that moment, I think, that really made it where I went sort of like, and let go of trying to control things that I had no control over anyway. And I mean, so many of us burn up our energy trying to control what other people think of us and other things like that, that we don't have any control over. And we forget to put our attention on the quality of this moment right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I just love how, some of the other things that you have written about and teach about is this body intelligence, like this way that even sometimes when you talk about the sounds that you make or the way that the vibrations that you put through your body, like yeah, it really speaks to just this fundamental way of being that allows the goodness or the abundance and the creativity to really flow through you.
Yes, and I think that each of us has as a gift, we don't have to do anything to earn it, that pure state of consciousness. And how we have to kind of bring it forward, though, is by not keeping running the same old programs that obscure who we really are. And one of the things, like I talk about in The Big Leap, I talk about how we progress through different zones, and that many of us eat up our energy doing stuff we're no good at. I call it the incompetence zone. And some of us use our energy doing stuff we're good at, but somebody else could do just as well. I call that the competence zone. And then I say the excellence zone is where you really can get stuck, though, because when you're in your excellence zone, you're doing stuff that you're really good at. You probably make money at it. You get good feedback for it. But yet it's not really your true genius. It doesn't really tap into your true creativity. The moment you can get yourself out of those three boxes and get on what I call the genius spiral, life takes on a whole new meaning then. A lot of life has to do with purpose and intention. That if you are clear about what your purpose is, life will kind of fall into place around it. Like in the ancient Sanskrit, the ancient Indian religious text says that the means congregate around sattva. Sattva is purity, pure consciousness that I'm talking about. That the means to do something gather around that, and that you don't have to know the means to do everything. You don't have to know how to do everything that you need to get done. You just need to open the space and be in the space where that possibility can come forth. So, like this morning, I talked to my business partner in my movie business, Stephen Simon, and we were trying to figure out the title of something. And so we had a kind of a creative jam session. And I'd come up with one title, and the moment I said it, he said, "Boy, that sounds long. Let's see if we can trim it down." And we got it trimmed down to where it just popped. And he said something really interesting. He said, "I'm not a good creative person. I couldn't have created that, but I'm a good trimmer." And so it's great to have both kinds of folks and more kinds of folks in an organization that draws forth everybody's genius, because I'm great at creating things, the first draft of things, or, to write 42 or 43 books like I have, you got to go in a room, got to be comfortable going in a room by yourself for 2 or 3 hours and not coming out. That's kind of one of the fundamental requirements. And I've always loved that, but it's not for everybody, not everybody likes to do that. And I have friends that like to sit in noisy cafes and coffee shops while they're doing their writing. And I couldn't write a good memo sitting in the noise of a coffee shop, I think. But everybody's different. I've got people that work with me that do a lot of their designs from a subway commute every day. They're working on their graphic design. So anyway, what I'm after is a big embrace of our genius, no matter what it takes, and being open to have that express itself in really unusual, unfamiliar ways.
Yeah, I love that. And so when you mention purpose, How do you see purpose and genius? What's the relationship between them?
Well, take my mantra is really a statement of purpose. Let's say that in the background of my life, I have running all the time an open program that says I expand in love, creativity, and abundance as I inspire others to do the same. And that's kind of the background program that's running, just like the background programming is running on my computer right now that's making it bright rather than dim, or a background thing is running that's making you have this particular picture. And so just like that, we want to develop a background program of your purpose so that where you go through life, you're guided by the feedback that occurs there. Because when you're in your purpose, when you're doing what you really are here to do, it has a different feeling to it. It has a feeling that I call flow. You have that kind of ease feeling in your body, and you have a movement in your body, kind of a pleasant shimmer going on in your body. I can feel it this moment. And it lets me know that I'm doing my purpose, which right now, I'm doing what I most love to do in the world. This is what I've most loved to do in the world now for 45 years, and I get to do it now 90% of the time. When I first started, I only got to do it maybe, well, when I first started, 0%, but when I first started to think about it, I was spending about 10% of my time doing what I most love to do. And then gradually I went to 30%, 50%, 70%. And now for the last bunch of years, it's been 90% of the time I spend my time doing what I most love to do. And wherever you are, maybe you're at 2% or 28% or 36%, wherever you are, I want you to expand that, because I know that it can be expanded with only 10 minutes a day of focus on your genius. When people come to work with us here in our seminars, or when executives come here for intensives, we ask them to start only with 10 minutes a day focusing on their genius. And because we know what's going to happen is that 10 minutes is going to soon become addictive, and they're going to want to spend 15 minutes doing it and then 20 minutes doing it. And pretty soon they're going to want to do it half their time and then 90% of their time. So you don't have to take many years to learn these things as I did. It can be much more compressed because so many of us have done it now. It's kind of like the guy that ran the 4-minute mile, many years ago. As soon as he broke it, pretty soon everybody's breaking it. So I think that no matter where you are, we just need to take a frank look at how much of my day am I spend doing what I most love to do, and then work up from there, making a commitment to do a little bit more each day.
Yeah. And so is genius what you would call that thing that you most love to do?
Yes, your genius has several qualities. Number one, it's when you're doing it, you're loving to do it. Number two, genius often has a timeless quality, so that when you're in it, you tend to lose track of time. Somebody will come in and say, it's time for lunch now, or time for dinner, or somebody will come in and time for a meeting, and you realize, oh, okay, be there. But you've been lost in that timeless world. I bet everybody's experienced when they were kids playing with something and kind of losing track of time, and forgetting to come home to dinner, or forgetting to do something because you were caught up in play. And so that's that kind of timelessness. A third way you can tell you're on your zone of genius and your genius spiral is that it doesn't take much time to do things that create big results. So one of my businesses that I sold for $6.7 million some years ago, it actually took me about 10 seconds to think up the original idea. It came to me one day after meditation. So I got the idea, and then it took me about 10 seconds to have the conversation with a business partner that owned the other half of the business that I wanted to sell. And I told him the idea. We developed the heck out of it after a couple of years, and sold it for a gigantic multiple, because we've launched it, I think, with maybe $100,000, something like that. And so it was a classic two guys in a garage situation where we invented something, built it up, and sold it for a good multiple. And so that kind of thing, when you're in your genius, it didn't take me 10 years to figure out that idea. It took 10 seconds, and then a 10-minute conversation, and then a couple of years of boom, 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 boom execution.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm curious, well, first thing I'm curious about is How does your genius, so the genius kind of lets you in on the ideas or the big light bulb moments. How does it help you when you're actually on the road to implementing or delivering, like doing the hard work of actually creating it? Like what role does genius play there?
Good. Well, if I may show you a picture, I don't have my new book with me, but I do have the audio book, and I want to show you that it starts off with the goldfish image that's on the front of the Big Leap, but then if you follow it up, it goes into this soaring bird that illustrates what I call the genius spiral. And so one of the points I make in the new book is that there are moments every day, I call them genius moments, where you're presented with a problem, let's say, that you don't know how to solve. And that is a ticket to genius every time, because if you can, in that moment, make a little shift, what you do is you don't go down the old pathways you've been down before. You know, like many people, when they come up against a problem they don't know how to solve, will do more and more of what already isn't working. You know, it's like in a foreign country, if the person doesn't understand your accent, you start beating on the counter, you know, and yelling at them. Well, that's never the right way to get it done, because it just fractures the environment. So what needs to happen is you need to shift channels. You need to change channels and move in from a different direction. So in the joy of genius, it's a lot about making that little genius move. And that keys off of one big idea, and that is letting go of control, of trying to control things that you don't have any control over. The moment you do that, a vast open space opens up, and you need to catch yourself in the act of trying to control something that's uncontrollable, and then suddenly declaring it uncontrollable and experience that that breath of freedom that comes from not being attached to doing it the same old way. When you, and so that genius moment is your introduction to your genius, and it happens over and over and over again throughout the day. And if you start looking for them, I show you what to look for in the joy of genius. But once you start looking for it, it's kind of like, if you're driving down the road and you start looking for blue cars, you'll see more and more and more blue cars, just because you're focusing on that. And so what I say is, notice one genius moment one day, and the next day you'll notice 10 of them, and then you'll keep noticing them all the time. That's such a beautiful thing, because you'll realize that there are tickets to your genius just sitting around all the time waiting for you to be cashed in.
Wow. Yeah. And so this new book that you have, The Joy of Genius, it teaches us how to actually shift into that and to identify those moments.
Yes, it does. It's exactly about how to do that. It's a very careful little roadmap to how those moments occur. And it'll probably take you, well, I know for a guy emailed me the other day and said, you know, this is the most important self-help book I've ever read, and I read it on a commuter flight from Chicago to New York. And to me, that was the best thing he could have said, because I wrote this book to be read in the time it takes you to get on an airplane and fly from LA to San Francisco, or from Washington to New York, or from Chicago to Milwaukee. So I'm glad he read it from Chicago to New York, but you can do it from LA to San Francisco, I can tell you. And so it's only a 45 or an hour investment of your time. It started out as being a much bigger book like The Big Leap, but I kept trimming it down and down till I got it down to like 128 pages of the leanest information I could possibly get. And I also do the audio book in my own voice. So it's like sitting across from me in my office. And so it's kind of like a right in your ear sort of conversation. And a lot of authors do their audio like a big speech, but mine is almost like a coaching session in your ear, because I take you through the activities in the book. And also, we are very excited. We're going to be doing a series of live interactive conversations where I come on and I talk about the different activities in the book, and I take people through them on audio and video. So we're very excited about that too.
Awesome. Yeah. When is that going to be? How do I sign up?
Yes, you go to joyofgenius.com and you'll see the trailer for the book there and how to buy it. And then you come back and you input your order number and you'll get an automatic free ticket to the live seminar. The live seminar will be later on in November.
Awesome. And so this, you mentioned a genius move. Can you give an example of either a story or how would this work in kind of in your daily life?
Yes, let me give you an example. Now, this is one I bet everybody's had an experience of. I was heading for the door of a building where I have an office, and I was carrying a large cardboard box that had a bunch of DVDs and other stuff in it. And as I got up to the door, I realized, oh, it's after hours. I'm going to need my key to get in there, my building key. And I didn't have my building key with me. And because 99 times out of 100, when I go there, the door's already open and there's people going through it and everything like that. And so I stood there at the door for a minute and I just I had a feeling of irritation. So I felt that. And I said, okay, what am I going to do? Well, worst case scenario, I got to carry my box all the way back to my car, get in my car, drive back over to the other office, get the key to this building and come back over. So at the worst, it's going to cost me about 20 minutes of my life. Okay, so I got clear on that. And just then I see somebody coming through, opens the door for me, says, "Hi, Dr. Hendricks." And I say, "Thank you," and walk into the building. So that's a genius moment because I had the opportunity to do more and more of what wasn't working already, which is I could have been more and more irritated, but what's the point? You know, it wasn't going to open the door. And so instead of doing that, I got back into harmony and then magic happened. And that's what I think about, you know, that luck chases, what was it Louis Pasteur said? Chance favors the prepared mind. You know, like I say that luck chases you if you're on your purpose, if you're doing what you're meant to do here, that luck will just chase you. And all you got to do is slow down a little and it'll fall all over itself, catching up with you. I've had, oh, by the way, this is my 37th wedding anniversary with my wife, Katie, also known as Kathleen. On the front of books, it'll be Kathleen Hendricks, but around the house, she's known as Katie. And so we're just celebrating 37 years of marriage. And where I originally got the idea for the spiral, the genius spiral on the Joy of Genius, is that on our wedding day, we were on top of a mountain in Colorado doing our vows to each other. And as we were speaking our vows to each other, suddenly above us appeared a pair of magnificent hawks just circling around effortlessly in the sky above us. And as we spoke our vows to each other, we kept looking up between vows and noticing that the hawks were riding higher and higher up this spiral of effortlessness, up into the distance where finally, when we finished our vows, they were just two dots in the sky. And so that moment stuck with us for these many years. And finally, I had the opportunity to use it in the Joy of Genius, how the spiral really works. Because when you step into the genius spiral, it carries you along with it on currents. You don't have to flap your wings effortfully in order to rise higher and higher. You just learn to adjust and make certain adjustments that I talk about in the Joy of Genius, and that allows you to ride higher and higher all the time. It all starts with commitment, though, Eddie, that you have to start with a heartfelt commitment that you actually want to spend more and more of your time on the genius spiral. So I invite people to begin in the book by making a heartfelt, sincere commitment that, yes, I commit to learning how to live on the genius spiral. And so once you make that commitment, then life begins to unfold in such a way that it supports that commitment. Just like it did with my diet. You know, when I started eating differently, I lost 35 pounds the first month, just eating this whole new diet I'd created for myself. Every bite of food, I was asking myself, is this going to feed my new way of being, my new spirit being, or is it going to feed my old 300-pound way of being? So after a first month, I'd lost about 35 pounds and I was feeling better than I'd felt in ages. I was walking past an ice cream shop one time in Harvard Square, Brigham's Ice Cream, and I saw a little family in there and they were eating this big banana split, huge thing. And I just had to have one, even though I'd been on a diet, 35 pounds, and I was feeling great. I ran in and I got one of those and I sat there and I ate it. And for about 20 minutes, I felt high as a kite. I remember just walking down the street afterward, riding this immense sugar high. But then 20 minutes later, oh, wham. I felt so depressed and down and wrung out because I'd been living in this state of purity. And it's what I call in the Big Leap, the upper limit problem. I wasn't used to feeling that good, so I unconsciously found some way to shut myself down. And so that was my moment of learning, though. Next time that feeling came up, I said, I realized I could steer right around that and navigate through it.
Wow. Yeah, you're so full of these amazing stories and moments. I mean, it sounds like just a profound letting go and then being open to whatever shows up. And even the upper limit problem being a form of control, like we're trying to control something, even though it doesn't really turn out well for us. And so this just sounds like a repeated, intentional letting go and opening, but then being aware of what's to come.
Yes, I think that a lot of people mistake personal transformation and think it needs to be this event where a blinding light flashes and then you're always different ever since then. But it almost never happens that way. It's kind of like getting in physical shape. I go down to the gym 3 days a week and work out with a personal trainer. And it's a very important part of my life. I've been doing it now 3 times a week for I think 7 years. And I've really changed my body a lot at a time when a lot of people's bodies are, kind of turning to fat. I've gotten down to only about 9 or 10% body fat and, have a substantial amount of muscle and gained 4 or 5 pounds of muscle over the years. So, but there's no way you can do that except by repeatedly showing up. And a friend of mine was really out of shape, 30 pounds overweight, and he decided to create a new regime for himself. And what he did was make a commitment to doing 1 chin-up a day for a week. And then the second week, he did 2 chin-ups a day. He would go to the gym and do the machines and do the exercycle and those kinds of things. And then he would do 2 chin-ups. The third week, he set himself the goal of doing 3 chin-ups. By the end of the year, he could do 52 chin-ups, whereas he couldn't do hardly 1 to start with. And so that's a good metaphor, I think, for personal transformation, that if you want to keep it more effortlessly done, you can't just go to the gym and do 500 chin-ups the first day, because then you'll be sore the next day. But if you do just a little bit each day, that's why I say start with 10 minutes of focus on your genius. Everybody can get 10 minutes in their schedule. Even if all you do is go in a room and just say, what is my genius? What is my genius? Even if you didn't do anything but just do 10 minutes of wonder questions like that. That's what I call them in the Joy of Genius, is wonder questions. Questions that you really want to know, but you really don't know the answer to. And so I use them all the time in my work. And so in creating the joy of genius in yourself, you want to live in those big wonder questions like, what can I do this day that I most love to do? Or what can I do this day that 10 minutes of it would produce huge results?
Yeah. And so what is your genius? What did you discover to be your genius?
One aspect of my genius is being able to explain really complicated things in a really simple way. In fact, I take pride in being able to explain things to a 14-year-old daughter of a friend of mine. You know, like if I can explain something successfully to her, I know I've got a good way to explain it. You know, because you don't have to be a PhD from Harvard to understand the kinds of things that you and I are talking about. They are fundamentals of life, but we don't ever get taught them. You know, I never had a single course in communication all the way through high school, all the way through college. It wasn't until I got my master's degree that I learned something about human communication. To me, that's educational malpractice, because I know for a fact I've been to schools where they do have communication skills taught, and I've seen first graders sitting there doing reflective listening back and forth with each other, learning how to solve problems without making each other wrong. So it's not complicated stuff. It's just we need to spend time focusing on those kind of fundamentals.
Yeah. And so this ability that you have, which I totally can see, even in just this interview, the way you're describing things and talking about things, and just the powerful way that you frame things that just stick in my mind. Like I'll always think about the upper limit problem. Like I'm always gonna think about that. And yeah, so it is this whole totally genius thing. And so with purpose, it seems like that kind of running. Another example of the way you've explained purpose in such simple ways is like kind of the running software in the background, which, and then it sounds like genius is how you then make that purpose, manifest that purpose in your world. Would you say that's?
That's a very good summary of that. Yes, I think so. There's a wonderful quotation from the Gospel of Thomas that I have in the Joy of Genius in the new book, which is, if you bring forth what is within you, what is within you will save you. That's the first part of the quote. And it's a beautiful idea, and it's really practically true, too. I mean, think of the times in your life that you've really changed your life by bringing forth something that was within you that you were discovering. Or, you know, like I have a dear friend of mine that Katie and I did the marriage for them some years ago, two women who have been in the relationship for 25 or 30 years now. But one of them had never really come out as a lesbian to her father until she and Marlena had been married for several years. And so to have the courage then to go to someone like a father and say, Dad, I want you to know who I really am. I don't want to keep that hidden anymore. You know, that to me takes such great courage, and it's such an important bringing forth of something that's within you. You know, because if you don't bring forth things like that, then those things will eat you up. Another good friend of mine spent a day with, I forget the gentleman's name, but he was the #1 lie detector operator for the FBI for many years, and had done something like 3,000 lie detector tests. And one of the things that had happened in his life is that every Christmas time he gets showered with Christmas cards from people, many of whom are in prison, because during the course of the lie detector test, they broke down and confessed and ended up feeling so much better that they loved and appreciated him for it. They even send him cards from jail thanking you for being there for me when I confessed. Even though it ended up with them in prison, they still felt so much better about it. So that was mind-boggling to me, that the effect of bringing forth truths from within ourselves, how it can really affect our lives.
Wow, yeah, and just that bringing forth a truth and cultivating the courage to do so is what heals us.
Yeah.
And that is just profound. Yeah. Wow. So, last question. What advice do you have for people who are lost and just wanting purpose and meaning and fulfillment in their life?
Well, the image that came to mind is in some of our seminars, when you graduate from them, you get a little wristband, a little silicon wristband that says, breathe, move, love on it. And what you can do always when you're lost, if you're feeling uncentered and off center, you can do those three things because we have control over all of them. You can take a few easy breaths. Science tells us that it only takes 3 deep breaths to begin to change our body chemistry. So 3 easy breaths. The reason it says move on it is because if you simply change your body position around a little bit, you restore a little bit of flow. You know, many people will just kind of sit there for an hour and then wonder why they feel stuck. You know, but if they breathe and move a little bit, it gets the juices flowing. The third thing is love, that you can always love as much as you can from wherever you are. You're never going to do it perfectly. None of us are ever going to be able to have the perfect love, but you love as much as you can from wherever you are. And so breathe, move, love. Those are the 3 fundamentals that we think you should do if you really get stuck.
Wow. And a powerful mantra as well. Well, thank you so much, Gay, for just spending this time with me, sharing so much of your wisdom and stories with me. You've totally impacted my life, and you've continued to do so with thousands of people. I'm sure every year it's more. And so I just want to thank you so much for all the work that you do. Thank you.
My pleasure. And back at you, Eddie, for doing this kind of work that you're doing, getting the messages out into the world. Bless your heart.
Thank you.